Everybody's here except for Patty. Is Patty online? Because I didn't hear. Oh, she's coming? All right. Well, she'll be here in 5 seconds, so we'll put her on. We're going to go to public comment. I do have one public comment that is on the agenda. Ms. Wheeler, come on down.
Good evening. I'm Kim Sheeler, a Spanish teacher here at the high school. I'm acting in the capacity this evening as district coordinator for world language. I first want to thank the CIT committee for allowing the world language teachers to be part of the discussion last week. I don't want to steal your thunder, Tina, but I did want to speak out on behalf of the world language department to say that we are very excited about the one proposal brought up at CIT with exploration of language going to 6th grade, a pre-level 1 in 7th grade, and level 1 in 8th. However, we do hope that we were heard when we stated that there is a need for a teacher for the 2 classes in Spanish 1 at the middle school. We currently have 4 sections of Spanish 1 at the middle school. We'll be dropping down to 3 the way it currently stands. And the numbers that we were given, there are over 150 students who are looking for Spanish 1. So that means 60 plus students will not have any level 1 language at all as an 8th grader. We appreciate that moving exploratory down to 6th is with the hope of building the program. However, our concern is that with 60 students not having access to level 1 as an 8th grader, it will not have the growth impact as hoped. I recognize it's difficult to find part-time teachers, especially for only 2 classes. That being said, I started teaching in '92, teaching 2 classes, and then in '93, teaching 3 classes because I wanted to. I wanted to be able to be home with my daughter. And so you just never know unless you put out there and ask and see if somebody might be wanting to teach just the 2 classes. As I said, we are thrilled and excited about dropping down to the exploratory. We just don't want to see the first year not done correctly. If we're going to do it, we want to do it correctly, and that will involve some sort of investment. I understand part of the agenda items are also the budget for this coming school year. But with retirements and everything, 2 periods a day, our hope is that you could find your way to look to find somebody to please do this, to give the students of the 8th grade class the best language experience possible instead of denying them that opportunity to have that class as their 8th grade class. Thank you.
Normally I don't ask questions, but I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
Because I don't know if this is going to be in the curriculum committee thing. Because you had mentioned 150 students.
Yes.
Now, out of those, I'm hoping you know this answer.
Those are the
if someone
Spanish
does.
students.
Spanish. Do they have a a preference?
Yes.
Like 150 say Spanish was their number 1 choice, but French is their number 2.
Yes,
and it's not really 150, or is it 150? And that's
there are 150 students that chose Spanish for first. There are 50 students that chose French as first, and there are 32 that chose German. So of the students that chose Spanish for first, there are, give me numbers right, there are 40 students that chose German as second. So we had even played with the numbers because solving problems is what we as teachers try to do. And so there are 40 students who chose German as second, and of those 40, 10 are in French. So there would be 30 students to have 2 sections of German instead of 1 section of German and 1 section of, and have the teacher teach 1 section German and 1 section Spanish. However, there are still the remaining students, the other 20-some students that would have Spanish, that would requested Spanish. And so my understanding is the way it's stated is there are 150 that chose Spanish first, there are 50 that chose French first, and there are 30-some that chose German first. And so we did look at those that chose, because there was only 1 section of German, who picked German as a second, but we didn't want to pull from the French numbers who chose Spanish as a first. And that's where we came up with the number of the 30 that chose German as second, but Spanish as first.
And how many teachers altogether right now?
There are going to be 1 teacher per language. There will be 1 teacher teaching 2 sections of Spanish 1 just in 8th grade. There'll be one teacher teaching 2 sections of French one, and our German teacher will teach 1 section of German and 1 section of Spanish. We would like to see him be able to have 2 sections of German to also grow the German program. But our concern is we're going from 4 sections down to 3, where with 150 students, you could actually have 6 sections of Spanish 1 as 8th graders. If we have the manpower to cover the classes, if we could give the students a chance to get the language that was chosen, that they opted to take this language. And I don't know how they're gonna make the decision. I wouldn't wanna be part of that discussion. But I don't know how you pick which 60 students do not get a language.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For now, we're going to move on to our presentations for tonight. 3.1, the PBIS update. Real quick, as I moved over here, we want to make sure the public knows everybody who you all are, so if you could just introduce yourselves so the public understands.
Anne-Marie Lucas, Director of Pupil Services, and I'll let the rest of the team, well, I was going to introduce them, but yeah, okay. So welcome. We're here tonight as a team, obviously, to present to you some of the elementary building positive behavior intervention support data as it aligns to our district goals. And the interventions, we're going to talk about the interventions that are in place to support students in attainment of those goals. So the team here presenting with me tonight, who I will introduce right now, is we have Mr. Seiler from West Pottsgrove Elementary. We have Dr. Stango at Ringing Rocks Elementary. We have Mrs. Kohler from Lower Pottsgrove Elementary. And then to round us out, we have Miss Becky Papano, our Coordinator of Special Services. So we are very thankful for the opportunity to be here tonight to share a little bit about the data and also how we're working through our goal for PBIS. So there we go. Next slide. So we have an agenda for you tonight, and we're each going to be talking. So there might be some toggling between the microphones. Just bear with us here. So the structure, if you want to go back to the other slide, I'm just going to talk about the structure a little bit, of tonight's presentation is here on this agenda. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about our goals that align to the data and the information that we're going to talk about. We're also going to really dive into the data as it's represented and displayed, and I'll introduce a little bit about what that data looks like and what you're going to see and hear tonight. Then each principal is going to talk about their building data and give you some perspective and analysis of that data and the results that they're seeing, as well as some of the interventions and professional development that they offer within the building to support the teachers. And then finally, Ms. Papano is going to talk a little bit about our positive referral data, reflection on the goal, and really the next steps, the so what, now what, in reflection of everything that we're going to talk about. So that brings us to the next slide. And we will allow opportunity at the end of everyone presenting for questions from the board. Okay? So this first slide here, or this third slide here, you will see our district goals that we're going to be talking about in relation to the data that we're going to be sharing here. So these 2 goals are the important goals of our entire district, and the central goal that drives all of our work is our student achievement goal here, and really the outcomes that students have around that first goal. Additionally, our goal on reducing discipline referrals and increasing positive referrals, or acknowledgments as we call them, will be represented in what is discussed in the data. And it's important to reflect that the discipline referral goal, as we've shared previously, is going to require some revision as we go into the next year and as we reflect from this year on how we work towards that goal. All right, next slide. Okay, so once the principals present, you're going to begin to see the behavioral data that supports our goal towards reducing that discipline referral goal data. So on their slides, we're going to talk about major behavioral incidents. These are administrator-supported behavioral responses. A major student behavior is one where the student is repeatedly engaging behaviors that require support from an administrator. Minor behaviors, and as you can see here, they're handled within the classroom, the teacher. Those are also tracked, but we're not going to share them tonight with you. We're really focusing on those major behaviors, the ones that require that administrative support. We're also going to talk a little bit about our CPI, de-escalation, team-supported behaviors. These are what we call de-escalation support calls, which when we call it a CPI call because it's named after the de-escalation restraint technique methodology that we use. It stands for Crisis Prevention Institute. So a CPI call is when an interventionist, typically that's a registered behavior technician, might respond to support with calming a student down or giving them, a break. So they can be major, similar to what you noted, that is noted here, the administrator-managed ones, to help. And then finally, we're going to be talking about our triangle data, and you'll see the nice triangles that I think I share in many of our presentations. This data aligns to our MTSS triangle that we talk about with Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions. With Tier 1, we should see about 80% of our student population performing at that level. Tier 2 is about 15 to 20%, and then Tier 3 is about 5%. So for the Tier 3 data, it's going to be important to note this includes students who have 6 or more major behavioral referrals or the administrator-managed type behaviors, okay? Next slide. Finally, before I hand it over to the principals, we just wanted to give you, and I know this is very hard to see, but I think you might have it or we can share it with you in a different format as well. But this is what we call a positive behavior intervention support flow chart. This is, it helps to capture kind of the response tree, how things flow when there might be a need to intervene. So I am not going to read it to you, but each chart, each building has a chart like this that helps to define for staff the way in which a behavior might be supported and then an intervention is put into place. As you can see from it, it's very thoughtful, methodical, and explained and understood by all staff. So I'm now going to stop talking, and I am going to hand it over to the principals. They're going to take turns presenting and talking about all of this robust data that I've been sharing or saying we're going to share. They're going to walk you through the data and, again, talk about some of the interventions that are in place within their building, including staffing, areas like that, as well as some of the professional development, since it goes hand in hand in supporting student behavior. All right, so without further ado, I will hand it over to Mr. Seiler first, and we can talk a little bit about West Pottsgrove. And I'm going to turn my mic off.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us this evening, and we're very excited to be able to share our data and the hard work that our teams are doing in each of the elementary buildings. I'm going to start off by talking to you about the most frequently reported behaviors that we see at West Pottsgrove Elementary School. We have a series of behaviors identified. All of these are tracked through our office discipline referrals. So all staff members have access to reporting any behavioral infractions, and we have identified behaviors listed on each of those office discipline referrals. Staff are also provided with definitions of each of those referrals. So what it means to be disrespectful, we're all using the same language and the same definitions to be on the same page with reporting those behaviors. Anytime that behaviors occur, we make sure that we are addressing them twofold. My responsibility as the building principal is often to come in as the heavy and institute the disciplinary consequences there, but there's always support going through, primarily through our school counselor, to provide interventions and reteaching opportunities for any time that our students are providing or making poor choices or actions that need to be addressed. The most frequent behaviors that you'll see reported are physical aggression. That's the most frequent behavioral that we'll see in about half of our referrals. Behavior infractions come reported as physical aggression. We work with kindergarten, first, and second grade students. Those are little bodies that are still learning impulse control, boundaries, spatial recognition. So there's a lot of teaching that goes along with that specific behavior. Other behaviors that we'll address frequently include classroom disruption, defiance, elopement. Those are our most frequent behaviors that have been reported so far throughout this year. For us at West Pottsgrove, this has been a pretty consistent trend the last few years. We track the frequency of and time of each of those discipline referrals so that we can provide interventions appropriately. We track the time of day that an infraction occurs. We track the possible motivation of a behavior. We track the location that behavior occurred in, all with the hopes of being able to provide interventions and support student growth in learning what our Falcon 4 expectations are and how to model those each and every day. You'll see our referrals for the year to date kind of looks like a bell curve. We started off, we'll often see a term that educators refer to as the honeymoon period. So students will start off, everything's bright and rosy and wide-eyed as the school year started. As the year goes on, we have some friends who tend to come out of their shells and we work towards supporting them to meeting our building-wide expectations. Our referrals peaked right before the winter break in December. Was our highest month of disciplinary infractions. It's it's a range of 1 to 3 per day is what you're looking at with that information. So it's not a an overwhelming disparity between each month. But one thing that we do attribute that decline back in January to is through PBIS, we spend a lot of time teaching explicit lessons as to what those behaviors look like in each setting. So we will hold lessons on the bus and refer to teach students what it means to be safe on the bus. We'll teach lessons in the cafeteria so students know when we say be respectful at lunch, what does that mean? What does it mean to be positive while you're walking throughout the hallways? We spend a lot of time explicitly teaching what those expectations are in those content-specific areas. We start that at the beginning of the year, and then coming back after the winter break in January, we do those refresher lessons again. So that's at least what we refer to or attribute that decline from January to December to. Our CPI team will respond to a classroom anytime that there's a disruptive student or a student that needs to be removed from the classroom. That CPI team that Dr. Lucas referred to is constituted of myself as the building principal, our registered behavior technician, and we have 2 other CPI trained support staff members at West Pottsgrove Elementary School who will respond to those students who are in need of support as well. You can see throughout the year, it's been in the 20 to 30 range for the number of calls per month that our CPI team has tracked. We did have an increase in March. You see we jumped up to 73 calls there. 35 of those 73 calls for the month of March were a student who had requested a break. So the student we've been working with that student to identify different strategies as opposed to disruptive behavior when they were feeling frustrated. So instead of the classroom teacher intervening with that student, the CPI team has been able to respond, give that student a break, and prevent more disruptive behaviors from occurring later on. So that's not every time that a student is being intervened through the CPI team is it for something to the extreme of throwing a chair or anything along those lines. We have several incidents where, hey, we have a student who's expressing frustration. They need to, they need a break. They need to collect. They need to reset, and our CPI team will support in that way as well. So this is the triangle data for West Pottsgrove Elementary School that Dr. Lucas had just referred to. In an ideal MTSS system, that breakdown is about 80% of those students in green receiving 0 to 1 referrals. You can see at West Pottsgrove, we're at 88% of our students for the year have 0 to 1 discipline referrals. So that's 225 of our 255 students at West Pottsgrove have 0 to 1 office discipline referrals through the year. That tier 2, that middle group, that yellow portion of the triangle, are students who've received 2 to 5 disciplinary referrals throughout the school year. We have 21 students who've received more than 1 office discipline referral, but less than 6. And our highest level, our tier 3 there, we have 3% of our students who have, that's 9 students in the building who have received 6 or more discipline referrals throughout the year. So those are the ones that we're targeting most specifically for receiving our tier 3 support for behavioral interventions at West. So some of our supportive measures that have been rolled out for us this year, we've been able to increase an additional intervention tutor through our ESSER funds, so that intervention tutor at West is able to provide instructional intervention in both reading and math, and we do find that when students are performing well academically, behavior is a positive outcome for that as well. So we appreciate being able to offer that additional academic and instructional support. We've provided a lot of additional professional development for our staff throughout the year as well. That's included de-escalation training for our paraprofessionals, our support staff. McKinney-Vento, that's our students who are identified as homeless. And trauma training was provided by Melissa Manzon, our district social worker. We've spent a lot of work with our PBIS team this year. We were once again recognized by the state for implementing our Tier 1 services with fidelity throughout the building. We're very excited about that continued recognition, and our team is now working diligently towards applying for recognition of our Tier 2 services. And there's a whole lot of labor-intensive efforts that go into that process, and those efforts are taking place at West Pottsgrove Elementary School. Ms. Papano has provided de-escalation training for our staff as well. We've been implementing Second Step, which is a social emotional learning curriculum that we use for at West Pottsgrove Elementary School and all buildings in all elementary schools in the district. An exciting growth there last year was the first year that we were able to implement Second Step with our classroom teachers. Previously, we'd brought in representatives from Creative Health who'd provided that training for us, but we were able to purchase those materials for the district and professional development for our teachers so that they could implement those lessons and that learning to our students directly. I want to give a huge shout out to Mrs. Snyder, the school counselor at West Pottsgrove Elementary School, who does a tremendous amount of work in supporting the social emotional needs of our students through a variety of different ways. As part of our win time, each building has a period intervention block in their schedules that we refer to as win time, an acronym for What I Need, and we target students with specifically what are their biggest struggles and their biggest needs. We address that both instructionally and behaviorally, social emotionally as well. So during that time, if we've identified students who their top need is a social emotional focus, those students will work with Mrs. Snyder during those times. She sees in our win blocks throughout the 5-day week. She sees 82 students that are meet with her in a few different groups. So some of the WIN groups that she focuses on, some of her intervention groups include self-control, self-esteem, friendship, expression of feelings, confidence building, and anxiety. There may be students who are in one of those groups. There may be students who are in multiple groups receiving those interventions. Again, all differentiated and individualized to what our students need. Our teachers and counselor collaborate directly on identifying the students for those services. She also provides a breakfast club for our students, meets with a group of students every day that we've targeted. There's 9 students currently in that group who we've identified need an additional layer of support to get their day started on a positive note, set them up for success, and she meets with them on a daily basis. Each of our elementary schools also have an ESAP team, that's Elementary Student Assistance Program. That's a team of staff members that work together to develop interventions and supports for students who and families who are in need of those services. We've serviced 31 students who have come through our ESAP program throughout this year. An important member of that ESAP team at West Pottsgrove Elementary School is Annette Moyer. She is our creative health liaison and is able to connect a lot of our families with outside resources and supports, counseling, things of that nature, if that's necessary. Or if families are interested and willing to access those resources. And she also offers what we refer to as MH3, which is six sessions, 3 hours, 6 30-minute sessions of free counseling that she's able to provide in school, and that's been a really great bridge for us for families who are interested in dipping their toe in the pool, so to speak, of counseling services, and she's able to bridge that gap for us, provide some initial counseling services, and then expand on those services if families are interested. We break those services down to an individual student level. We have a number of students who participate in an intervention we refer to as check-in, check-out. So they'll have an identified staff member that they have a really strong relationship with. They'll check in with that staff member at the beginning of the day. They'll check out with them at the end of the day, and it provides an opportunity for some additional guidance and mentorship and relationship building for our students and staff. So that's a glimpse of the support measures and interventions and resources that we've been implementing at West Pottsgrove Elementary School. Hand it over to Dr. Stengo to talk to you about ROCKS.
Thank you, Mr. Seiler. Thanks for having me tonight. Good to see everyone. Since ROCKS is the other K-2 building, you'll probably hear some consistent messages in some areas that are very similar to West, as we try to be consistent with our interventions and our programming across the K-2 buildings. But as we focus here on ROCKS tonight, if you see the data there, very similar to what we're seeing at ROCKS is the physical aggression is an area that we seem to be about 53% of our behavior data is in that area, along with defiance or insubordination or noncompliance. Physical aggression, it's kind of like a continuum. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are sending our crisis team down to the room. It may be that a student put his or her hands on another student. It could be de-escalated very, very quickly, and we move on. Or it may be to the level where we need some support, maybe myself or a member of our crisis team that has to respond. So there is a continuum there as well. Some of the other behaviors we're seeing is just some noncompliance in the classroom. Again, there's a continuum there. Maybe something that we can address very quickly, or something that or in a situation with a student where he or she may need to be removed from the classroom or de-escalated depending on the situation. Next slide. So here's our major referrals per month. August, again, as Mr. Sai said, was our honeymoon time, but we experienced a little bit of a significant behaviors right from the beginning of the school year. We were averaging about 2 or so major referrals per day. That was pretty consistent across the months. Some were a little lower than 2, some a little higher than 2. That holiday time around the winter break, we saw an uptick as well. And then we saw some months where it dropped below 2 major referrals per day. So that's our crisis response referrals. Similar to our major referrals, we started off the year with some significant challenges, some significant behaviors. We averaged about, as you can see there, starting off about 5 per day. But once we sort of got our team and our resources in place, or we got to know the kids again, you could see from the data there that it started to trend downward. And as you see after the holiday or the winter break, again, we have some positions, some more professional development, some resources that we have. Our team worked really, really hard to support our students and our families. And as you can see from the data and the bars, it's trending downward and rather nicely. So we're proud of that work there. That's our triangle data, similar to what you saw over at West. Majority of our students, over 87% of our students have one or fewer discipline referrals. I kind of can't see that number there, that 2 to 5. Okay. 7, oh, thank you, Mrs. Kohler. I can count on you. About 7, a little over 7%, almost 8% have 2 to 5. And that top, that red, that is about 5% of our students who are the students that we spend a lot of time supporting, who are over 6 plus referrals. So some similarities between West and Rocks is some additional positions. We have another intervention tutor, so that we have 4 total now. We have a registered RBT, excuse me. We had 1, now we have 2. And what's new this year to Rocks is we have a licensed behavior specialist that started off with 2 days a week, but he's now with us 3 days a week. His name is Mr. Brandon Campbell. He's a wonderful resource to our building. Not only does he support our students, but he also supports our staff with ideas and suggestions on how to work with our students, how to develop plans, how to implement some strategies to help with the students. So he's been a wonderful resource. New this year, starting in about January, is Dr. Jordan Watson from Springfield Psych. She is a registered clinician. She's every day with us. She works with approximately 10 students on a daily basis. She's a licensed clinician. Similar to Mr. Campbell, she's a valuable resource, not only working individually with students, but we meet often with her to talk about our students, what's working, what she's doing with the students, the progress that she's making with the students. Sometimes the kids seek her out when they're feeling frustrated or they need a moment, they need a break. So it's a new face, a safe space. She has her own safe space that we've found for her, which is nice to hear that the kids are using her as a resource. That's her world. That's her training. But what's added for me, an added layer for me, which I'm very happy about, is that when I meet with her, she talks about some things we could try differently with the students who may not be making the progress that we expect, because there's some significant challenges or behaviors here, so it might take some time. But she sees a different lens than we may, and she's able to sit with my teams and really work through some of the plans and interventions we have with our students. And she also spends a lot of time with families. So she's another valuable resource with family connections. And we do have a new special ed teacher this year. It's a long-term sub, but we have that person on board, Miss Sarah Segar. So she's already started the last couple of weeks. She's already off and running, supporting our students, doing a great job so far. Our professional development this year, we've had our support staff going through some verbal de-escalation with Mrs. Papano over here. That's been multiple times this year. We've had some McKinney Vento and ACEs and trauma training through our social work and Mrs. Manzon. We've had some CPI training, again with Mrs. Papano. That is a big, our trauma-informed practices is something that our staff is very interested in learning more about, so we've already begun with that type of training. The IU has been out through our PBIS advanced tiers. We've had multiple meetings there, so we're excited about learning more about our advanced tiers. A lady by the name of Amanda from Patton has come out and worked with our emotional support classroom. Our emotional support classroom, there's students who have some behavior challenges, so we want to make sure we have, she's been a great resource. That's her world, so she comes in and she's been in our building multiple times, just trying to look at our room, what can we do differently, how we configure the room, what are the plans that we're putting in place for our students, how can we tweak those plans, how can we adjust those plans to make sure that we're doing everything we can, that we're looking through a variety of lenses. And you heard that we just started with our second step bullying supplement. We had that training recently, and we're excited about that. Some of our other interventions are ESAP. Thank you, Dr. Kiley, our counselor. Wendy Kiley is a wonderful resource. She kind of spearheads that with Jennifer Gerhardt is our ESAP liaison from Creative Health. She's working currently with about 37 students, and of those 37, we've had 19 of those MH3 sessions. So 19 of our students have gone through the 6 sessions. What's nice about the ESAP process is she also connects with families. Our IST and our core team meets regularly. They help support not only academics, but also behavior interventions. As you know, academics and behavior go hand in hand. So we meet on a regular basis to talk about our students and what's working and what's not and what we need to do differently. This year, through Dr. Kiley, we have Peter's Place Grief Counseling coming and work with some of our students. We have a good amount of students who are experiencing some grief. So we want to make sure, as our little guys here, K-2 level, understand what that feels like, how to process their feelings, how to work through their emotions, how to deal with grief. Grief and loss looks differently for everybody, especially, you know, when they're 5 and 6-year-olds. We have individualized student plans. Our BCBA, Mr. Campbell, he does some observations, and Mrs. Courtney Niddle is another person who comes in the building. She's a registered BCBA who helps us as well. We have 20 students currently doing the check-in, check-out, trying to get our day off to a great start and checking in on those students throughout the day as often as possible, definitely in the morning and before they leave. We also have some students doing what we call a soft start. So when they arrive to school, they may not go right into their typical classroom to kind of connect with a staff member they have a really positive rapport with. It might be a breakfast with them. They might meet with them to play some games, establish some goals, sense of how they're feeling, establish some, you know, like specific goals for the day, and if a student is experiencing something, what he or she may do throughout the day. So that's a nice way for some of our students to start off the day. I was actually in the classroom the other day with some of the students, and they were doing like a circle time, just talking about something that happened the day before and processing it. So it was a really nice way to start the day. We have students with individual behavior plans. As I mentioned, we have breakfast and lunch bunts, and you know, some students who are experiencing some challenges on the bus, we work with them individually. So we have a nice set of resources at our school, and we're starting to really see the progress. Yep, and I believe we're off to lower. Mrs. Kohler.
Thank you, Dr. Stanko. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight and allowing us this opportunity to share this with you. As we start to look at lower, the one thing just to remember is, since we do have all of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in the district, we have 660 some students. Right now we're at about 662. So, you know, we're obviously dealing with a much larger student population. So that's, you know, when you see some of the bigger numbers, you know, we have more students. So if you look at our behaviors, not all that dissimilar from with the little ones. Our biggest areas of concern, the physical aggression, the defiance, insubordination, noncompliance, the language, and some general disruptions, elopement, those kinds of things are also part of what we deal with on a regular basis. So you can see, you know, we're still dealing with a lot of the same things that we deal with the younger students. We just start to see a little bit of an uptick with the use of the inappropriate language. And frankly, a lot of that occurs on the bus, which we're really working hard on in a lot of ways. Next slide. So when you look at our referrals, now one of the things I just want to point out when you look at this is it's spring, and our 5th graders are becoming 6th graders right before our eyes. It's not unusual at this level to see an uptick in some of the behaviors as the students start to kind of get spring fever and see the light at the end of the tunnel. So it's not unusual for us to see our uptick of behaviors happen more in the spring, whereas with the younger students, they're happening more around that winter break time. You'll see our trends are a little bit different, but like I said, at this level, it's not an unusual trend. And we are currently averaging about 4.5 referrals on a daily basis. The majority of our referrals do come from the bus, the playground, and the cafeteria, those unstructured parts of the student's day. Our CPI referrals, just like the other buildings, we have a CPI team. We have a bit larger CPI team because we have more students. And we also have an RBT in our building. We also have a number of other teachers, some teachers that are trained. Myself, Mrs. Dunn, are also trained, but a number of our support staff that are trained in CPI who are amazing with our students. And they're very good at the de-escalation piece of it, where they're able to really help the kids calm down, refocus, and move on with their day. One of the things with our CPI, One of our biggest ones is elopement, and those are kids that are getting frustrated and walking out of the classroom. So it's us then making sure that they're safe in a safe space, those kinds of things. So that's our CPI data. And then if you look at our triangle, we're not all that dissimilar, again, from our other levels. We're at about 80% of our students that have 0 or 1 referral. And then we have our students with 2 to 5 referrals are about 14%, and our 6 or more is at about 6%. So we're kind of almost where we need to be as far as the triangle goes, as far as the percentages. So it's about 40 of our students that have those 6 to 8 referrals plus. And I will share that with us, if we really pulled it apart, what we would see is a lot of those students are students with some combinations of bus referrals and referrals during the school day that we're working with those kids on. Okay. And our supportive measures. So you've heard a lot of the things from my 2 colleagues at the K-2. We have a lot of the same things in place at Lower. We also have a Springfield psychological licensed counselor with us, Miss Rebecca Gauk. She joined us in January. She's currently also working with about 10 students, and she's doing an amazing job with those kids. We meet with her as part of our Tier 2 and Tier 3 team every Monday. She gives us an update on how those kiddos are doing, and she also connects with the families, and she's very supportive when those students might be needing an opportunity to talk through a bad choice that they made or be de-escalated in some capacity. We also added 1 additional intervention tutor for math this year. That is funded through ESSER money, and that would be funded through the next school year, ending in 2024. We've had all of the same professional development that Dr. Stango and Mr. Seiler talked about. In addition, we did some work with emotional poverty, which is some new work from Dr. Ruby Payne, who did some work on poverty many years ago. But a lot of her work was also giving some teachers some additional tools on how to de-escalate a student in the classroom. We review our PBIS data as a building on a monthly basis, and that gets shared out with our staff. We do the verbal de-escalation with our regular staff as well as the paraeducators on a regular basis. And again, some of the same others with the McKinney-Vento, the ACEs training, the trauma training, all of those things are happening for Lower teachers as well. Some of our student support systems that we have in place. So we currently have a mentoring program at Lower, which is staff members that volunteer to mentor a student. They check in with those students on a regular basis. And we currently have 29 of our students that are assigned to those staff mentors. And we identify those students through what's called the DOT activity that we do early. We do like around November once we've had a chance to get to know the students. And we use that information to determine which kids might need an additional adult to make a connection with. Not a lot of people know who they are. You know, those kids that are in danger of falling through the cracks, as it were, so we can make sure we can connect them with a mentor. We have what's called a GRIT groups running with our counselors, and the GRIT stands for Getting Along with Others, Responsibility, Integrity, and Tenacity. We have 14 students across the 3 grades in that. Those students are identified by those students with the higher numbers of referrals to be in those groups. We have approximately 209 students that have been in a lunch bunch in some form or another this year. And we currently have 8 students that are officially on check-in, check-out, but again, those mentoring students are also unofficially checking in and checking out on a regular basis. We've had 41 total ESAP cases, with about 21 of those students engaging in that MH3 that my colleagues have talked about. Our creative health liaison is Deb Donahue, who's been in our district for a long time, working with our students, and she does a great job with that, with our kids and the families. We have our IST core team. We meet regularly to talk about academic and behavior interventions. We also do behavior and academic interventions during win time for our students. We do have in-school suspension at Lower Pottsgrove, and if a student is assigned to in-school suspension, there is a supportive piece to that where they can reflect on their behavior and kind of talk about some strategies on what they can do differently when they go back to their classroom. That supportive measure is a part of any of our discipline with our students, because we don't, you made a mistake, what are you going to do differently? We don't want this to happen again, is how we work with the students. We do the PBIS lesson refreshers as well. We do the lessons in the fall, refreshers in January, and our student leaders made videos with additional refreshers that we've been sharing with the students in the spring. We use our threat assessment policy that we have as a district. We've done a number of those. And we do our weekly PBIS recognitions for students through our Golden Ticket program. So that's just some of what's going on at Lower. There's a lot going on to support our students. So I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Papano.
All right, thank you for having me. So in consideration of all the data discussed, reviewed, and in reflection of our larger goal on reducing discipline referral by 2% for the 2021-22 school year, this slide captures the progress towards that goal. As shared earlier, it is important to reflect that we are seeing a majority of our students with 0 to 1 referrals for behavior. However, we did see some increases this year. We are up to 3 per day, or 3 more per day. We still do not have a lot of behaviors overall. It is a small number of students who are having the higher number of behaviors. As was reflected by the principals in the triangle data, at West, they're at 88.28%, at Rocks, 87%, and at Lower, 79.76% of students with 0 or 1 behavioral referral. It is important to reflect and celebrate those positives, which brings me to the next slide. This slide represents the data on the positive acknowledgements given by both staff and on the bus in the school across all the elementary schools. This includes each building acknowledging the students who demonstrated our Falcon 4, providing them with tickets and other incentives to positively promote these behaviors. The goal was to increase by 150 per reporting period. We are seeing increases significantly higher than that set goal. Moving forward, we will use this data to develop a goal that continues to reflect positive increase in numbers to support the positive acknowledgement of students through this system. Next slide, please. So now what do we do? As we move forward, we continue to work on these goals to ensure that we are meeting the social, emotional, behavioral, and educational needs of all of our students. You will see on this slide some of our next steps. It is important to note that our district is changing. Enrollment has dropped over the past couple years as people are having fewer children. Post-pandemic, we also are seeing a need for more academic, social, and emotional and mental health needs with all of our students. But post-pandemic, we are also working more with our PBIS teams to continue to meet, and we work with the network supported by Bataan through PBIS. This includes advanced tier trainings as we build our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, responding positively to students' needs. We are looking at structured, intentional trauma-informed training for staff. Specifically on May 16th, we are planning a half-day at Ringing Rocks for staff led by the Springfield Psych Tech clinicians. We are also consulting with teachers, or they will also be consulting with the teachers at their PLCs and providing coaching opportunities for them on an ongoing status throughout the rest of the school year. Into the next year, we are looking into continuing expanding the trauma-informed training across the district. Additionally, staff will be trained in vicarious trauma. And that is trauma that happens to staff as a result of the trauma that they are dealing with within the students. Additionally, we plan to invite Springfield Psych to one of the board meetings in May to share the results and data and to talk about the services that they are offering at both Lower and Ringing Rocks elementary schools. We will use this data to make decisions about continuing and/or expansion of the service to students. We will be sharing also the PAYS data, the Pennsylvania Youth Survey analysis, at a future board meeting, and what it looks like with the actions that we will be going forward with to help them, and they will be, excuse me. And again, next year, they will be taking this survey, as they do every 2 years, for our 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students. Finally, we have a plan to work through the quality indicators of emotional support services and programs, or QSEP, as it's called. This will enable us to examine the programs and services offered to students with emotional disturbance and emotional support needs. This process assists teams in examining the elements within 7 domains and is intended to assess the whole emotional support program throughout the entire district. It is not intended to evaluate each individual classroom, but to help us make more of a continuum of supports and services for our students with the emotional needs throughout the district. And that would be the end.
And then we have our final slide, which is questions from all of you. Thank you for your attention to, I know that was a lot of data and information.
When was the data collected? Just because I noticed that April dropped off on all of them. I wasn't sure that's because it was done. What's that? Oh, sorry.
I was asked 2 questions. When was the data collected? Just because I noticed that April was much lower in all of them. I didn't know if that's because it was, like, April was just that much better, or it was done April 1st. So that's just curious.
Believe the exact date was April 14th,
So, like,
was
half a
our
month
cutoff.
then. Okay,
Yes,
great.
but from the beginning of the school year until that date,
Okay,
yes.
great, thank you. Oh, that's right, yeah, so that would, I forgot about that too, thank you. The other question I had is on the individual support sessions. I think you had mentioned there's like 3 of them per, 3 sessions they could have. I'm guessing that a lot of students probably need more than 3 sessions, so what happens once they reach that 3? What do we do at that point? And I imagine there's a
Yeah, so the
variety.
MH3 or individual support sessions, they're actually lessons that the creative health staff do with the students, and they're broken into 6 30-minute sessions. And a lot of times there is an opportunity, if it's felt that the student would benefit from it, that they can extend those sessions to another round of 3 hours. The other thing that it's been really helpful with us having is, I'm sure everybody is aware that right now there's a tremendous drought of mental health support in our bigger world, and it helps in those cases where we have families on waiting lists, so at least the students are getting something. I mean, I know in our case that Mrs. Donahue has extended for some of our kids just because she felt that they needed more, and they were still on a waiting list.
Okay,
So that's.
So it's not written in stone, like they can
No,
keep
it
on,
is,
okay,
it is
great.
not.
Great, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
First, I thank you for your leadership that you're providing in your buildings and to the district. I very much believe that strong leaders make a big difference in schools. One of the responsibilities of the board is to approve the provision of resources needed to achieve our educational objectives. That includes the reduction of disruptive behavior. So the question, I'd really like to hear from each of the 3 principals. In your opinion, as the leader of your building, are you getting the resources you need to effectively respond to these behavioral issues? Mr. Seiler?
So, yeah, we have a great team. It's not a response or a job that any one person can do alone. So I'm, certainly very grateful, particularly to Ms. Pano. We see spends a lot of time providing those highest level of interventions for our students. Ms. Courtney Niddle is our newest BCBA as well, provides a tremendous amount of support. So yeah, certainly very grateful for the resources that we have available to support our students.
Thank you. It very much seems, just from even reading the news or watching TV, that behaviors are becoming more problematic, not only in kids, but in adults. It's a crazy world. My opinion is that changes the role of people who work with kids, which means teachers. So it's a different job than it was 20 years ago. But thank you for that answer. Dr. Stango, are you getting the resources that you need to effectively respond to the behavioral issues at Ringing Rocks?
Yeah, well, we had some significant issues in the beginning of the year, and pleased to see that, we have another RBT that was allocated to our building, a BCBA was there 2 days a week, and then was increased to 3 days a week, and Mr. Campbell, and Jordan Watson, our Springfield psych, and our Patan rep. So we have, like you heard Mr. Seiler said, we have a great team, and when you saw that CPI data, I mean, it was a challenge. We still have significant behaviors, but in the beginning of the year, it was there, and we have that team now. And as you can see, we have the resources in place to help these kids. It just takes some time. There's some significant mental health challenges we're experiencing with some students, but the resources we have now, you're starting to see the progress. So the team has responded.
Thank you. And Mrs. Kohler at Lower, in your opinion, as the leader there, are you getting the resources you need to effectively respond to the behavioral issues?
Well, I will tell you that we are busy a lot, and we do have great resources. We do have access to a number of resources. We also have some unfilled positions, and it's not for not trying, and that's, duty aides and some student aides that we've just not been able to fill over the course of the year. So it's not that we don't have the ability to have the resources. We can't find anybody to fill them. So that remains a challenge for us, and that, with those shortages in different places, it means the rest of us are just pitching in and rolling up our sleeves. So we have lots of wonderful people who are working really hard and doing what they need to do. We have an amazing team, but, we do have some unfilled positions. And it's not because of anybody's fault. It's just there's not people that want to fill them. So, we're really trying. We've moved some special education aides around to better meet the needs of the different buildings. So we, and as a district team, we all work really well together to make sure that the resources are getting to where they need to support the students and the teachers.
Thank you, Mrs. Kohler. And again, thank you to each of the three of you for your leadership. It's a final question, so over to Dr. Finnerty. I think even as the public is listening to this presentation, and I hear that it's 5% or less of the students who are exhibiting the disruptive behavior that gets labeled. So it becomes easy, I think, in the public's mind to just say, well, throw them out. My job would be easier if that kid wasn't there. Send them somewhere, make their parents take greater responsibility. Not my job, kind of is, I'm here to teach. Address that issue, if you would, Dr. Finnerty.
Sure. So the first thing to think about is these are our kids and these are our community members, and we love them, and they pay taxes, and they have a right to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So these are our taxpayers, these are our communities, these are our kids, and we care about them, and we want them here. There are instances where behaviors are beyond our capacity to manage, and we have placed students, we've worked with families to place students in more supportive environments. What the reality of that is, That is a pretty rare thing. There's, especially when we're talking about young children, placements are pretty rare. There's not a lot of schools that accept young children, and there's not a lot of spaces for them. So that's a challenge. And then the other challenge is cost. So each placement, it varies, but you're looking at basically $55,000 per kid, plus tuition, and plus transportation, and plus, if a child needs an aide, you're looking at even more. So it's pretty easy for the cost of a single child's needs to be somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $100,000. So it's pretty significant. As each of our principals have mentioned, we have good people. We have teachers. We have special ed teachers and behavioral support people and interventionists across our district, and they're good people, and they're making a difference. So we're investing in our own staff to support our own kids. And yes, as I said, we have placed a small number of children. Once we realize that all the interventions that we have, that we can apply, did not meet the needs of a child. So that's where the analysis kind of falls in. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep.
I just have one comment, quick comment. Again, I thank you very, very much for your dedication to the students. Sometimes I look at students that are misbehaving. They don't want to be that way. They need the leadership and they need the guidance. And I think the parents need to be more involved. I mean, being a teacher has changed over the years. There's all different types of hats you have to wear, but I know here in Pottsgrove your dedication, and I'm just really proud of you.
And I wanted to also thank you all, each of you, for coming after a long work day and presenting to us. These are hard conversations to have, and we don't grow together unless we have them. And the time that it took for you to create this presentation and dig down into the numbers and present the transparency to the community, to us as a board, it's really remarkable. And also, something I heard a lot from each of you was the importance of your guidance departments. And I know that is, am I correct that it's one guidance counselor per building? Outstanding work for them, and I want to acknowledge that out here because that's just outstanding. You talk about, Mrs. Kohler had mentioned the number of students that you have, so that's one person fielding that, and large ratios for these folks to be doing and digging in. So outstanding work to your guidance teams, outstanding work to you, and again, thank you for not shying away from hard conversations and showing all the steps that you're taking and all the programs that are being put in place to help our kids, because they really are our kids, they are our community. So again, thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Do we have anybody else? All right, I'm going to go then. First, I definitely appreciate everything you guys did, putting this together in the first 2 weeks and all like that. Now, I'm going to be a little bit critical, though. All right, couple of things. Our goal, as you showed, was 2.2% decrease. But as of now, you're showing a 60% increase. That's a huge swing there. So my question is, with all the resources, and we heard the question saying, yes, thank you for the resources and everything like that, right? What is getting better? What do you see is working? Because you're saying all these children are in these different programs, right? But the numbers continue to increase, right? And quite frankly, with your chart, I don't think someone was looking at these charts very well, because in the charts, you only went up to the 14th of April. But you counted the work days for all of April, all of May, and all of June. So obviously, they're going to have 0 instances. We haven't had them yet. I would expect those instances to come in at some point, and then our numbers would even increase even more. So my question is mainly with all these programs and the resources you're saying thank you for, and we will give you what we need and what you need, is it working? Do you see it getting better?
Yes, would be my short answer. We are working with students, the youngest population. It's not, it's not a hard and fast fixed input-output type of system working with children. So we identify we have pretty strong process and procedures for identifying students who are in need of many of these supports. We monitor their progress regularly to make sure that what the interventions and resources that they're receiving are effective. We convene regularly as teams to review that data and review that student growth. If students are meeting those goals, then we do pull back from those interventions. If students are not responding to those interventions that we're initially administering to students, we'll increase or change the approach and reconvene as teams to game plan and develop further interventions and supports for students. But and I'll speak specifically for the West Pottsgrove Elementary School team, where our students were at the beginning of the year to where they are today. It's nothing short of transformational, the work that our staff does, supporting those families. And, the need has certainly grown, but, we're continuing to work diligently to meet those needs.
I would say yes as well. As you heard me say, we have some significant, behaviors, but trauma. We talked about trauma a lot tonight. We talked about, mental health. We talked about counseling. Students of this age and who have some of those needs, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of people. The teachers work really, really hard to connect with those kids. That's some of the strengths I see in the Ring of Rocks teachers is just how they connect work with kids. So if you look at, as Mr. Siler said, from the beginning of the year to now, some of the kids are still experiencing some behaviors, but it's getting better. Dr. Jordan Watson from the Springfield Psych, she's only been there a few months. That takes time to work with some of those students who are experiencing some of our most high-level needs. Our BCBA, his expertise, it just takes some time. So we're seeing the movement. We're seeing a lot of movement in our kids. And it's just, we're proud of what our teams are doing. We're proud of what the resources we have there and who support our kids. And, we have some families who struggle and we have some students who experience a lot of life experiences at such a young age. So it takes like not to use what's that cliche? It takes like a village, you know what I'm saying? And that's not to make it light, but it really does take an incredible team to help some of these students at this age, and we have that, and it starts with those classroom teachers who are with them 6 hours a day and pouring their hearts into those kids, and we're starting to see the movement. So I would say yes.
All right, the reason why I asked about that, I'm always going to be a numbers guy. Always have, always will be. So when I look at the numbers, I understand Lower is going to have the highest number. They have the most children, right? So when they have a 4.5 referral a day versus Ringing, who has less than half of those students having a 3 per day, and West, which is closer to Ringing, I don't think you have as many, but you're close, right? Only having like 1 per day, I'm thinking, okay, Ringing, 3 times as many instances with half the students of Lower. I just want to make sure, again, we're giving you the resources you need for next year, because quite frankly, right, these numbers are not acceptable. I would think everybody in this room would agree, not acceptable to increase by 60+% of instances from last year. Our goal was to decrease by 2.2%. So when we're looking about, when you were talking about as into what are we going to do next, what's the goals? When we're doing the goals again this summer, well, first goal I'm going to say is I want to be at least what we were in 21 for instances, which means a 60% decrease. Now that's asking a lot, but you're telling me, and I want to make sure I'm right, you're telling me it's going to take time, but we have the resources in place to get back to where we were. Am I accurate with that? If I'm not, someone please say, no, We need more.
Well, Mr. Leach, here's the piece to that none of us can answer. Because when I look at some of our students this year that have struggled the most, they were students that weren't with me last year. They were move-ins or those kinds of things. So we can program for what we know, and we can program for the kids that we have. It's when we have those students that move in over the summer and different times of the year, which, we certainly welcome all of our families into the Pottsgrove community. But sometimes because they're unknowns, we don't have programming in place for them. So then we have to figure out how we're going to support those students. So I think we all agree that we want to see a decrease, and we work hard through our school-wide positive behavior teams with our Falcon 4, the things that we put in place there to reduce the behaviors across the building. But sometimes it's those unknowns that we have to kind of respond to when they become known, that give us the little bit more, where we have to figure out what we're going to do to put resources in place. So what we're doing now, things will be better next year with the students that we know and that we have. We're just going to have to be ready and prepared as a community, as a group, to be able to respond to any of those students that are new to us next year that could present some issues for us.
Definitely understandable. Thank you incredibly. You guys did a lot of work in a very short period of time to put this together, so I do appreciate that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, we're going to move on. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you. For just one comment before I make my superintendent's report. There are errors. Thank you for picking out. I did notice there are some errors in the data. That's my mistake.
Okay, I didn't want to point them all out.
I was actually looking at the spreadsheet that feeds it, and the spreadsheet that feeds it was accurate, and somehow when I copied that in, some numbers got a little screwy. So I'll make some corrections and update that the numbers are actually correct. But that is my mistake, not the team's. Okay. Two things to talk about. First, we have the Pottsgrove Educational 5K Color Run. That will be, we'll be hosting that on the 22nd 5K Color Run and Kids Fun Run on May 12th at 6 p.m. Student runners in our Pride program have been training for this race all spring. The race is open to the public, and it's the largest fundraising event for our Ed Foundation, which funds a number of educational enrichments, including supporting our music theater programs, our STEM education initiatives. Please come out, run or walk for a great cause. Board members, you're welcome as well. We could also use some volunteers. So please, if you're interested and available, contact Daniel Sabelski or Steve Onspach. You can also look at our website, and there's a flyer there. Secondly, we have the Pottsgrove Village Resource Fair. We're excited to share that the Pottsgrove Village is hosting our second annual Community Resource Fair for Health, Wellness, and Special Needs on May 11th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. We're set to break attendance records this year since our event coincides with Special Olympics Eastern Regional Track Championships, which will include families and players from districts across the county on campus right next to our event. That's my report.
Thank you. We're going to move on to action items personnel. I need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion under action items that we approve 5.1 through 5.9.
I have a motion and a second to approve 5.1. Oh, I don't have a second. Now I have a second. I have a motion and a second to approve 5.1 through 5.9. Do I have any comments or questions on those?
Yes, I would just like to congratulate the two retirees. I wish them the best.
So noted. Anybody else? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on to 5.10.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 5.10.
A motion, a second, to approve the Summer Success Program. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that one?
Could we just have a review for the public?
Good evening. Thank you for asking, Mrs. Grimm. Our Summer Success Program, we have a large variety of summer programming that occurs, particularly over the last several years across all grade levels. The program that you're asking about specifically is run through our federal programs, specifically through Title I. What that does is provide additional learning time for our students in grades incoming K through incoming fifth graders. And that programming includes both reading and math support, as well as introducing students to the setting if they're new to the district or even don't have previous school experience. So we've been running that actually for ever since I've been here, and I think long before that as well. Typically, it serves approximately 150 kids, I believe, but I can get you those exact numbers. You're welcome.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on to 5.11.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 5.11 and 5.12 together.
I have a motion, a second, to approve both 5.11 and 5.12. Does anybody have any comments or questions on those? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We move on to action items business.
I'd like to make a motion, under business, we approve 6.1.
I have a motion and a second to approve 6.1. Do we have any comments or questions?
We do have a budget presentation prepared, and at this point, I'd like to invite our business manager, Deb Clayhole, to walk us through that.
On this slide, in the first column, what you see is our current millage rate and how that would produce $39,013,253. Just in the other columns, I just give you an estimate of what the taxes would be if we would increase our taxes to the Act 1 index of 5.4%. And that would give us an additional about $2.2 million. The other columns, I just gave you estimates, what it would be if we did a 4%, 3%, 2% increase, and how much that would increase our taxes. In the very last column, I think it's important to note that I just did 0.1. So for every 0.1% of a tax increase, it would give us $40,874. Okay, next slide. The next slide is just our revenue and variance summary report. In the first section there, I'm showing what our 22-23 budget is compared to what we're projecting. And there are some variances in that column. And down below, I'm giving you the detail of what makes up that 2.2 variance in local income. We had earnings on investment this year. We never thought the interest rates would increase, so we're going to receive an additional $0.9 million in interest revenue. Also, transfer taxes are up about $500,000. We had one property, large property, that sold, and we received almost $500,000. It was $400 and some thousand in transfer taxes. Our mercantile taxes are up $0.3 million, and then our real estate taxes are up $0.2 million. In the next column, we're showing what we're budgeting for the 23-24 and what the variance is budget to budget from one year to the next. And again, earnings on investments are up almost $1 million, $0.9 0.9 million, and our real estate taxes are up 0.3 million. And that has to do with any changes, what happened to a property, so any interim assessed values that happen, that's what that 0.3 million is. In this scenario for the 23-24, it does not have any tax increase. So just looking at the numbers here, this is with no tax increase. Next slide. The next slide just is the identical slide to the first one, except it's in detail. I think it went yeah, there we go. So this slide is the local revenue and variances. So it just gives a detail of what's included in local revenue. You can see the major differences that I pointed out previously from the 22 to 23. You can see the variances for, current real estate's up, transfer taxes are up, and the mercantile taxes are up, and then earnings on investments, that's all up. And budget to budget variances, it's all listed there in detail, all the different revenues that we collect. The largest increase there for budget to budget, of course, is the earnings on investments. In 21-22 year, we were getting no interest whatsoever. The Fed rate was so low that we were barely making 0.1% on our investments. And during the course of 22-23, of course, the Fed funds rate kept increasing and increasing. So now we're earning anywhere between 4 and 5% on our investments. So that's why that's a huge increase from year to year. Next slide is in the same format, but it just shows our state revenue. This year, we are projecting to come in higher. Of course, when we budget, we normally budget flat. I know from 21-22, normally school districts will just budget what they budgeted the previous year, assuming that we're going to get the same amount of money from the state for basic ed. The state have increased that amount. It's a very detailed formula. It has to do with the median income, and it looks at every school district. So it takes the whole state into perspective. So it's how we rate in relation to everybody else. So if we do nothing and we stay the same, it's how we are in relations to others. So we could actually have the same amount of median income in our area, but in our relationship to the rest of the state, we could go down or could go up, and that affects the additional funding that they put in that basic ed. So it's it's more complicated than that. It's a massive formula, but to simplify it, that's kind of how we're in relation to everybody else. So I feel really comfortable in those projections. If you go out to the state website, you see the differences there in basic ed for the 22-23 projections and special ed. Those are the numbers as of March, the end of March, what the state was projecting on those two numbers. And next year, I am projecting a $300,000 increase in that basic ed subsidy, because the state has projected that our relationship to the rest of the state is going to be a little higher. So I'm projecting $300,000 higher in basic ed than what we did budget for in what we actually are going to receive in the 22-23 year. So that difference budget to budget is almost $1 million in basic ed funding. Special ed is, I kept it flat. We're not sure what's going to happen with special ed. Of course, the state budget doesn't come out until after we have to present our final budget, but that is a $350,000 increase from the previous year. The sinking fund decrease of $350,000, which kind of offsets that, is our PlanCon money that we got, which the state has a moratorium on us getting money for, this is capital projects. They stopped it many, many years ago, so we received our very last payment of that in 22-23. The 72,575 remaining is the Plan Con money that we receive for our tech center, or VOTech center, because we pay a portion of their bond issue. Next slide is our federal revenue. Same layout as the previous two slides for local and state. This is all governed by how much federal money. The majority of the difference there is ESSER 2 money is going away. And so that's almost $1 million decrease there. It's a little bit of increase in ESSER 3 money. So we're going to be $600,000 less than what we budgeted for in 22-23 in federal dollars. Then the next slide just shows our expenditures by category, by major category. The big difference there is in other purchase services, about $800,000 we're coming in less in our budget to budget from 22 to 23 overall. Just to put this into perspective, when you're looking at our total budget, our fixed costs are at 93, almost 94% of our budget. So those are almost costs that, you know, we have no control over. That's just what the numbers are. They're not something that we could decrease. For instance, salaries and benefits are all based upon our union contracts or our employees that we have currently. Our supplies are going up. A lot of the, due to COVID, we've heard Yvette talk about that. Our supplies are increasing. Special ed costs are going up. So if you go to the next slide, this shows a projection over the next 5 years, projecting out what our revenue projection is and what our expenditures are going to be. So if you look at the two scenarios, the one at the top has no increase to our tax base, and the one at the bottom shows what it would be if we would increase our taxes 3% year over year. So if we would increase taxes over the next 5 years, the district would we'd see a deficit of almost $20 million versus we're almost at a break even, $500,000, almost $400,000 shy if we increased our taxes 3% year over year. So, then I want to go back to the original slide that I showed you. So when you look at 23-24 budget, we're almost at a break even, our revenue to expenses. But I'm asking for at least, you know, like the 2.5% increases in our taxes. And the reason for that is we have $1 million extra that we're going to have to fund in 24-25. That's an increase to our salaries. There's going to be another increase, about $500,000 in benefits. So that's $1.5 million. Then with the ESSER money going away, which is $1.6 million, we're going to have a deficit in 24-25 of at least $3.1 million. So if you look at the Act 1 increase this year, which is 5.4, the Act 1 increase at 5.4 only gives you 2.2 million. So if we don't raise taxes this year, we'll never be able to cover the deficit in 24-25. The Act 1 index won't be high enough to cover that for our district. So we need to have a gradual increase till we get to 24-25 to make sure we can cover the deficit. Any questions?
Any question for anybody? Can you pull up the last slide where it?
Oh, very last slide, one more slide.
Yep, go.
Well, this is our historical rates, but the last slide, this is, if you do a 2.5% increases to our taxes, that would, on the average homeowner's assessed value of $120,000, that would increase their taxes $117, which is less than $10 a month.
Ask questions?
Yep.
Okay. You had pointed out earlier slides about interest going up, and as a result, increasing the money that we've been receiving. Now, when you're planning ahead, when you're looking ahead, and I realize this falls under the crystal ball portion of it, but are you expecting those interest rates to remain at that point? What happens if they go back to where they were last year or the year before?
If you look at the interest, if we go to the detail, the interest on investments, I decreased it slightly. I'm projecting this year to come in about $1,044,000, and I put it in at $1 million.
What about down the road, with your projections, would you increase a little bit each year, or is it just?
No, I did not increase it each year. So hopefully we'll remain around that percent, you know, like a little, like if it levels out. Like this year, I think it, like they're projecting right now, it may drop a little bit. It's gonna, when I spoke to our investment advisor, he said the feds are probably gonna come out and raise it another quarter point, but then he thinks it's gonna start maybe going down a little bit from there, that they'll start dropping it a little bit. But, you know, when you budget, you can't always budget for the what-ifs, like if, of course, if we had a crystal ball, we'd all be wealthy and know how to invest our money. But usually, you have the inverse effect of when interest rates drops, you're gonna have property taxes, transfer taxes move a little bit more, because then you're gonna see families starting to sell their home and buying different homes. So sometimes you see the you know, if one's up, the other one's down, so. Yeah, it's kind of, it should, hopefully both, with the two of them, how we projected, it should level out between the two.
All right, thank you very much.
Quick question. In your projections going out a couple of years, what did you use for the projections for state aid and federal aid?
Staying constant from this point out, because we're hoping they don't decrease because of our percentage relationship to the rest of the other school districts within the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because that's an unknown. We never know what the state's going to do. And since our relationship kind of went up and we're going to be high next year, I'm hoping it doesn't come down, that maybe they'll give more funding. So if our relationship does drop a little bit because we did increase, then, you know, maybe it'll offset.
Yeah, I appreciate the amount of effort that goes into projections, especially going out a couple of years, because it gets very shaky.
Yes.
If I can just add, just a short thought. We have our 8-year history of taxes in this district has been stellar. I mean, there's been very minimal tax increases over the last 8 years. I believe, if I'm correct, we've averaged a 0.4% increase over the last number of years. We've brought in a surplus last year. We expect to bring in a surplus this year, which again, I know some people don't look at that as a positive, because we're bringing in more money than we need. The short-term crunch that we have with losing the federal dollars and the window that we have before all of our debt starts coming off the books is a challenge. So this is not a great position, and here I am asking for a 2.5% tax increase, which is significantly more than this district has done in the last few years. But we're doing it because we think it's needed. We think it is critical to us navigating this next 5 years before, when the federal aid drops off and when our debt, before our debt starts coming off, to do all the programming that we want to do to keep this district great, and also to prepare and invest in the construction projects that we badly need. So we realize what we're asking. And if we pass this tax increase and do bring in a surplus next year, okay. I understand where some people might see that as a negative, but that's debt that we could then not have to take to do the investments in our physical renovations that we badly need to do over the next 5-10 years. So that's why we're asking what we're asking. So I don't envy the position you're in, but I do think this is the appropriate course. So thank you.
Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to be the same as I was to the other administration. I'm going to be critical. My question to you is in regards to how you're doing this budget, and I'm not an accountant at all, but my question is, on all of your budgets where you have a budget, a projection, and then a budget. Is the projection what we're estimating is our actual this year? What is the projection? Because you have a budget, what we budgeted, then you have a projection number. I'm thinking that's actually when I go back like 3 slides.
Yeah, that's what I'm projecting for us to come in at
All right.
this year.
Keep going the other way, whichever way it is. Nope. I need the words to project right here. So this is what we budgeted last year. This is pretty much what we're expecting to finish with, correct?
Correct.
So why does this start with that number and not this number? See, when I do budgets for my business, I don't go back and say, hey, look, I budgeted in 21 or 22 $5 I was going to spend. I ended up spending $4. Why am I budgeting and my numbers are based off of my prior years and not what I actually took in?
For personnel services, we have a program that takes every single employee's salary. And for instance, teachers, it'll look at if a teacher's came in and they're making a wage they're starting out at bachelor's +1, they're gonna move to bachelor's +2 next year. So it's taken their actual wages. So that 30,000 budget is actual approved positions at the district and what the salaries are gonna be.
No, I understand with the salary part. Let's say supplies, for example. We budgeted for 3.3 million. We spent 3.3 million. Now you're saying it's only going to be 2.7 million, and we're gaining 600,000. Why are we dropping so much there? And then in other areas, I don't understand why these numbers, especially with the revenue. And if you go to the revenue screen, all right? Is this the revenue screen? Okay, so when you're talking revenue, you're basing these numbers off of this. Look, we got this number, we're gonna stay exactly the same. We got the same, but we're saying we're gonna be less. We got the same, we're saying obviously we know that one's gonna be less, you said it. I don't understand why these numbers and all of these numbers are based off of this. I don't understand why we're not starting with what we got. That's what I don't understand.
So,
I mean, it's a perfect example. I charge my customer $100 for a widget, right? Last year, I budgeted I was going to take in $1 million, right? And I took in $1.1 million. Well, I'm not going to turn around and say my budget now is to take in $1 million. I sold $1.1 million. I'm thinking, well, I'm either going to grow or stay the same. I'm not going to go down. And your numbers show we're going down.
but you might go down based on market conditions.
Mate's a difficult thing with me okay, I understand being conservative, and I totally get that, right? And I'm not an accountant. way more knowledgeable than I am when it comes to building any of these things. I just have, and I agree 100%, we have to have a larger budget and a larger tax increase. My issue is, our budget last year, I believe, was minus 900,000. We were going to be short 900,000. We always say we're going to be short. We're a plus almost 2 million. I think you were projecting it to be 1.8 million this year. Last year we were, and we budgeted for, so to me that's 2.7 million better than we thought, which is good. But when I tell the home buyer and the taxpayer that we're off by $3 million, now $3 million to us doesn't sound like a lot. We have almost $80 million budget. $3 million is very little. But to the home buyer, $3 million is a lot. So I'm trying to justify how next year I'm expecting us to be at a 10,000 shortage, when I know for a fact if we go up to 2.5%, we're going to probably be around a $2.5 to $3 million overage. And then the same is going to happen, the following years when we start hitting that number, the 2 years down the road where we're 3 million off. All the funds are down and everything like that. So I agree we have to start now so we can make sure that we're there. I'm just not sure if 2.5 is the great number. That's all.
So just a clarification, so it's always been my experience that in school budgeting, because of the timetable, we always build budgets on budget, not budget on projection. So that's just.
Budget on actual.
We always build school budgets in every year that I've ever been part of it. It's been budget to budget. I get the point about the projection, which is based on actuals, but I don't know that I can explain why it's always budget to budget, but that's always been the case in every budget I've ever been involved in. Deb, can you speak to that?
And it's usually budget to budget in state dollars, because the state does not come out and announce how much funding the schools are going to receive until after we pass the budget. And then we never really know what our formula is going to be in relationship to the rest of the state. So it's the majority of school districts that I know just will budget based upon actually what they actually received usually for state money. And I've done that with the state money, and I actually have increased it because the projection from PASBO is they think that Pottsgrove's numbers for next year, so I wasn't that conservative when I come to basic ed funding, is I increased it 300,000, and most school districts wouldn't do that. But PASBO was confident that our percent will go up. So I did increase it 300,000 on basic ed funding. Special ed, normally you budget what you received the previous year. Normally that does not go down. Usually you're pretty good. Social Security, and that's a percent of what we pay, we get back from the state, so it's based upon how we budget our salaries, so it would be, the 0.0765 of salaries, half of that goes into that line item. We have a percent from the state of what we should receive on retirement subsidy, and that went down. So as you can see, it's almost flat. The retirement income is almost flat from year to year, but it's because our salaries went up, but the PSERS rate went down. So we did get a little reprieve with our rate, because it's at 35.26 and it's going to 34%. So, with local, looking at, like earned income tax, we get those estimates, like a lot of those mercantile taxes and so forth, we get those estimates from Berkheimer, who collects those. Our IDEA funds are going down. If you look at local revenue for IDEA, that money is federal pass-through money from the MCIU. The ARP function of IDEA money is going away, so that's why you see a reduction in the IDEA money. So it isn't, always, I can't say I'm always using the exact budget or actual. It's what is the best number based upon the knowledge that I know. So it's based upon, what, MCIU is saying are.
And I understand that. I'm just saying, if I show this to the average person, and I tell them we budgeted last year for $45.9 million for local, and that's where most of our money comes. We all know that. 80% of our money comes from that area. And we actually received $48 million. So we received roughly $2 million more this year than we did last year locally, right? And I know we're going to say that one was a transfer tax like $500,000, and you never know they're going to come up. When they do, great, thank you. And then you budget for 46.9, so $47 million. So you're budgeting for us to receive about $1 million less this year, next year, than we received this year. But your budget variance says we're getting $970,000 more. See, that's where if I'm a regular person, I'm sitting there saying, I don't get that. You're saying you're getting less than what you actually got, but you're saying in the variance, you're getting $973,000 more because it's based off of the budget number. That's where I think our taxpayers get confused as into why it looks that way. To me, it would say, oh, we're short $1 million because we got 48, we're projected to get 47, we're short $1 million. Not we're plus 973,000. You see what I'm saying on that? I'm trying to, I know we have an idea of all the numbers, but the people don't. And all they're going to see is we raised 2.5% taxes. Why did we raise 2.5% taxes? You had a $2 million surplus. You're only projected to lose $10,000 next year. And this year you projected to be $900,000. Why is my taxes going up? That's what they see. And we're not making this presentation easy for them to read. I don't know if there's a way to make it that way. I don't know. But that's what I'm saying in regards to that, and that's why I'm trying to get into the 2.5. I'm just not at 2.5 yet.
Al, I don't want to defend the 2.5%. I am sort of in agreement with you. But to address the initial question of where the budget numbers come from, what is consistently done in these budgets, and apparently everybody does it, well, whatever is the most conservative assumption is the assumption we make. We know that the state aid is going to increase. It tends to always do that. But we're going to keep it constant. That keeps the budget low. We know that the interest rates will probably change, which will drop our income from our investments. We're going to assume that that drop goes down. Whatever makes the budget tighter is what is done. And yeah, I understand, I get what you're saying and I understand it. But I know where these people are coming from, because let's imagine the situation. You do a, quote, honest budget. We'll use realistic estimates for everything. We will assume that state aid goes up. We will assume something reasonable about interest rates, and we come up with a number. And if we hit it and we're right, we're heroes. If we guess wrong, because no matter how you dress it up, all the numbers in this table are guesses, especially the farther out you go. If you guess wrong and we show up with a deficit, there's going to be hell to pay. Because if you have to come up with a couple of $1 million in March because your estimates were the best you could do back almost a year prior, then we're all going to be in trouble, not just the administration, but the people who are on the board, because you didn't get it right. And now we're going to have an emergency crisis to come up with a couple $1 million. Now, I don't know that, I'm not an accountant, but I don't know that this is the fairest way of preparing a budget. What it is the most conservative way of preparing a budget. And I don't mean that in a political sense, I mean that in the sense of this is going to give us the safest number. And that's my stab at it. And if you don't agree with my analysis, well, that's, I don't want to.
No, there's no disagreeing in anything. I agree 100% as into it's the most conservative. And this is not, and I want to make sure everybody understands this, I am not being critical towards the administration asking for 2.5% because that's their job. Their job is to try to make sure that they're asking for everything that they think they need. It's up to us, so we sit there and say, okay, maybe we're not going to give you the full $10 this year. I'm only going to give you the 9. Or, hey, no, I don't think 10's enough. I think you need 11. That's their job is what they're doing right now. Dr. Finnerty thinks and says he needs 2.5%. That's what his best estimate is and his expertise. And he is by far more expert than I'm ever going to be at this.
Yeah, when
I'm just trying to wrap my head as in, is the 2.5 the number I want to go with? That's all.
Yeah, when I did project estimates for projects in industry, and I think Dr. Finnerty did the same thing when he worked, was an engineer. You came in with the biggest number you could justify to your boss, because there would be hate to pay if you didn't budget enough money and you ran out of cash. You were a hero if you had a surplus. And that's kind of the situation he's working under. Now, is 2.5% enough? Hopefully, if we look at this, maybe in a year or so, we can go back down to a lower interest rate if everything else is okay. But the biggest risk that I see is not just this budget, but we're coming off 2 years of the economy being turned off. In an economy like the United States, you don't work like a light switch, flip the switch and it comes back. And we're going to work through what are called transients, ups and downs and God knows what, and the interest rate's going to do this and that, and people are going to be unemployed and employed, and once you get through that transient from COVID, you get to work through the transient from global warming. And you get to work through the transient of electrified vehicles. And you get to work through those transients. It's never going to be 2019 again. And that's the story that he has to think about in the back of his mind, and I have to think about in the back of mine. And I don't know what we're going to have to do, but we need to build there is $50 million of capital improvements. I've been to Greek chorus, and when I give my report, I'll talk about it. A Greek chorus shouting to King Priam, "My God, the Greeks are at the temple and they've got that horse, the Trojan horse, and they're pushing it out and hoping we take it." That's what I've been talking about, capital improvements. $50 million. We've got that 50 million from, and I'm leaping ahead here, from Giza, from Schrader, and from our own in-house estimate that was done actually before Dr. Finnerty started here. So it's $50 million corrected for inflation. That's the capital expenses we're going to have to face. Because our job is educating, not just educating the kids that are here now, but the kids that'll be here in 10 or 12 years. Some of those kids haven't even been born yet, but we have to figure out how to educate them. So that's the issue that we're all having to deal with one way or the other, whether we're talking about capital expenditures for upgrading, or we're talking about salaries for special ed to compensate for the deficiencies created by COVID. You know, and it's a gloomy thing. It's hard not to be depressed. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nippert. One comment with regard to our ability to project. So salaries and benefits are, as we all know, the biggest driver. So that's roughly 70% of the budget. And we know that the cost of labor is 3.5% year over year is a fair estimate for the cost of labor. Some of the contracts that we've signed, and they've come in about that. So that number, of course, we could get retirements, and we could have open positions, and that could drive those costs down. But that is a fair estimate of our largest line item. So if you look at 70% of your budget's going up 3.5% every year, a zero is not going to cut it. Does that make sense?
No, zero's not going to cut.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments or questions?
Just a clarification, just because I don't know if we have more people listening in this evening that normally don't listen in, or if it's completely flatlined. But Chuck was talking about the $50 million in capital improvement. Just to clarify, that's really $50 million worth of repairs and maintenance on all of our buildings that we need to make, just in case anyone was curious what that was. It wasn't like we're building a new stadium or something. It was, we want to maintain our buildings and make sure that they're not leaking and that they're safe for our students.
Any other comments or questions? All right. All those in favor to approve the preliminary final budget at 2.5%?
Can you clarify what you mean by preliminary?
Well, because we have to approve a budget that has to be posted for 30 days, and then they will come back with the final budget, which will be the budget. You can make changes. You're approving 2.5. That doesn't mean you're saying 2.5 today, but if you approve 2.5 today without any direction, I would expect him to say, I'm giving you 2.5 in 30 days. So I'm asking, are we approving 2.5 as the preliminary final budget? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Aye. So we have. You're opposed? We have one. We have one opposed, so we have 8-1 to approve the final budget.
Proposed final budget.
Proposed final budget. Again, I'm going to approve it, but I prefer it to be lower than 2.5. We have that. We're going to move on to the next, which I'm sure, where is the next?
6.2.
6.2, the new contract.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the CMTA contract.
I have a motion and a second to approve the CMTA contract. Any comments or questions on this? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We move on to action items 7.1.
I'd like to make a motion under Education 7.1 that we approve the Pottsgrove School District Special Education Plan 2023 to 2026.
I have a motion and a second to approve the special education plans. Anybody have any comments or questions on this one? Hearing none. All those
Actually,
go ahead.
can you maybe explain what the whole plan is? I mean, if you read through it, a lot of things is, not listed, so it may seem sort of like a large checklist, but.
So the explanation, I might need Dr. Lucas up here, depending on how deep an explanation you want. The state requires every 3 years that we present a plan to meet the needs of all of our identified students. And that is the special ed plan. And it incorporates, it is a very long document, and it incorporates all aspects of our planning to provide services and meet the needs of our students. If you want more, we can get you more. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on to the MCIU report.
All right, I will be quick. This is from the board meeting from last month. The next board meeting is actually tomorrow, which I will unfortunately have to Zoom again, but at least I'm there. I'd rather be in person, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So the highlight last month was they highlighted the transition services, and that's for you know, the students that are aging out and going to be entering the real world, entering the workforce. One of the things that they talked about and showed a lot of pictures of was their coffee bar that they have at the MCIU, and they do have students running that, which I was unaware of because every time I'm there, it's, you know, nighttime and there's nobody running the coffee bar. But I just thought that was really great that they let students run it, and it was just they were just you know, talking a lot about all of the things that they do to help these kids prepare for the next step, and they just have a lot going on there that just helps the kids with everything that they need. I will be quick here. There were a couple surveys that went out. Blah, 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 blah. One thing that I thought was cool, Sandy Edling, she's the director of the MCIU Office of Business Services. She's been providing financial learning opportunities to all of the MCIU staff, and it's called Making Sense with Sandy. And they have quarterly lunch and learn meetings, and I just thought that was cool. You know, it's just, you know, help people with their finances. You know, some of the people there are young. You know, a lot of them have probably a lot of student debt, student loan debt, stuff like that. So I just thought that was kind of neat. Let's see. We did, we approved 2023-24 budgets for gifted services, Head Start supplemental assistance, Head Start quality improvement, state early intervention, and the Head Start COLA budget that will provide a 4.6% salary increase for all Head Start paid staff members. The rest was the last thing I will go over is they did, there were 20 new employees, 11 resignations, 1 retirement, 7 mentors were assigned to the induction program for the 22-23 school year, and 2 professional contracts were awarded to the following, to 2 employees. Other than that, we approved a whole bunch of other contracted things and all that good stuff. So the next sort of big thing that they have on their schedule is this Friday is well, today was their PAIU Day on the Hill. I'm not quite sure what that was, but Friday is the MCIU Legislative Breakfast in King of Prussia. That's kind of a big deal. I haven't been in a while, so this will be the first time in a while, and I think a bunch of you guys are going too, which will be nice, because the last time I went, I was the only board member there. So, you laugh? What?
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? All right, we're going to move on to committee items. Action 9.1, policy committee minutes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for the committee.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the minutes for policy committee meeting. Do I have any comments or questions on those? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We're going to move on to Operations Facility Report.
The second item was the budget presentation. Some of you may notice how I cleverly worked my remarks into the prior discussion before you voted. Sorry. Ooh. Some of you may have noticed how I worked my remarks in on the vote. So I won't go over that again. The first item of business discussed at the April 11th meeting was the Giza project update. This is the update on the estimate of savings by doing various capital projects. Giza had been meeting with the administration on a biweekly basis, and they're going to present their results to the committee. The projects for the summer, there are two projects that we're going to supposedly look at this summer. The first project is Ringing Rocks lighting, and the second project is window replacement on the middle school windows. The middle school windows reading, the project cost is $160,000, and there were several submissions. There were 15 contractors that were requested for information. It turned out none of them were willing to do it over the summer because they had already been booked. They received 4 spot responses for a total cost of $500,000. I've received other information that wait a minute, I lost my place.
Lighting and control for Ringing Rocks. You were on that one.
The two Ringing Rocks lighting replacement, the cost for these two projects would give a total cost of roughly $700,000, and they gave an estimate for the savings cost. Another project at Giza is one that occurred to me is some upgrades at West Elementary. First of which was door replacement, which there was a figure, and I think you were telling me there's been a substitute to replace 6 exterior doors. I know at the meeting there was some confusion over whether the doors were interior or exterior. These are exterior doors, which, as I gather, must be, because they're exterior doors, they're passageway doors that students go through, and this means they must be ADA compliant, and they must have mechanical door openers. So that contributes to the cost. The estimate here was $230,000, and I think that there may be another number that we got for door replacement. Am I correct?
Dr. Nippert, we'll be presenting new information at the May 11th board meeting on the doors. We'll actually be presenting information at the Facility Operations Committee, and then with the blessing of that committee, we'd actually be bringing it to the full board that same night.
Right. One other thing on that.
Real quick, it's at a much lower number.
Yeah.
It's like 50,000 and for
50,
4 doors.
I got a number of 51,000, but yeah. The other item at West is something near and dear to my heart, which is the broken bricks around the loading dock, which may be repaired over the summer. And I haven't heard an estimate on that.
Again, that's another item that we'll be talking about next month. We're looking at doing some exploratory work to see what is the root cause of some of that cracking, and then looking at possibly doing some already budgeted envelope work as early as this summer.
Yeah. So again, that's something that was in the exploratory stage for this, potentially this summer, and it might more likely be this fall. So anyway, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Nippert. We're going to move on to the Curriculum Integration Technology Committee meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Voorhis was kind enough to provide the report for tonight. Thank you in advance.
That's why I was asking, because the number that was given, remember the year for that, does that include?
Good evening again, everyone. The Curriculum Integration and Technology Committee met on April 18th at 6:30. We had several items on the agenda that evening, some of which you've already heard discussed this evening. The first of which was world language. You heard Mrs. Sheeler talk about that in the beginning. The conversation there was about, in the past,
Well, it's a legitimate question.
in the past, we've had our exploratory program that existed for world language during 7th grade, and that meant students get to experience all 3 languages so that they're able to make a decision about that in 8th grade. The recommendation of both administration as well as the world language department is shifting that back to 6th grade, then allowing another year, kind of like a pre-level 1, and then students moving into that level 1 experience. All of that in an effort, you've heard Dr. Finnerty talk before about building a better 9th grader. So we want more of our students to be able to experience level 3 and level 4 world language as they get into the high school. So this is yet another opportunity to kind of strengthen the students at the middle school and prepare them even better for the high school level. Another issue or another agenda item that we talked about tonight, at least partially, was social and emotional learning. You heard some of that come across in the positive behavior supports presentation that you heard earlier. Specifically, we've implemented in K-5, we've implemented Second Step, which is a social and emotional resource that is used to support the instruction of that. That was implemented last year in K-5. This year, that was expanded to the middle school as well. So now we're K-8 with that. Dr. Lucas reviewed some of the survey data that we have back from teachers. Much of that data at this point in time is really teacher perception data, which talks about how they're feeling about the implementation of that, which gives us ideas about what we need to do in terms of professional learning and how we move forward with that particular piece. Mr. Bittler shared a cybersecurity update, and his department has made multiple efforts there to really increase cybersecurity. 2 pieces that I'll highlight, although there's many. One is multi-factor authentication. So for me personally, when I sign into my device in the morning, I have to sign in on a secondary device to make sure that it is in fact me. And that was implemented for anybody essentially that works in district offices, I believe, as well as principals perhaps. And then a password policy that was implemented for everybody else, which talks about how long we all know those passwords that we love, and they keep changing on us, and you have to include some extra digits and characters and numbers and all that good stuff. So that was implemented as well. But again, there's several other areas that they're working through, all in an effort to increase the security there. In addition, Mr. Bittler also talked about a Chromebook handbook. He shared a draft of what that would look like, all in an effort to share with families and students the devices that we'll have with Chromebooks, really in an effort for what does caring for that device look like, what is your responsibility as a carrier of that particular device, and anything that you might need to know about that device. And then finally, Dr. Finnerty on that evening shared the flexible instructional day. You likely have heard that phrase before. Over the past couple of years, there were really 2 different efforts that were in place, really in an effort to make sure that all school districts are able to get their 180 days or the hour of requirements that are associated with that. One of those goes away. That's been an instructional time template. It's section 520.1. In the past, you've approved that as a board. which allowed us to make shifts if we ever needed to in terms of moving to a remote environment. Another option that actually existed before COVID came about and was really there for the purpose of weather closures was the flexible instructional day. We believe we do a far better job when we have our students in front of us. So really, remote instruction is a last resort to us, but it does provide us flexibility should we need that flexibility. So we are going to be applying for that. That will likely be on the next board agenda for review, and the application for that is due to the state by June 1st. So again, we'll have that on the next board meeting, and then we'll be able to submit that for approval thereafter. Mrs. McIntyre, anything you would like to add, or any questions among anybody?
I did want to add, I wanted to thank our World Language Department for coming out to the CIT meeting and presenting and adding such crucial commentary and the work that was done as far as the middle school, the things that are going to be taking place next year to be able to provide the additional opportunities for the kids. And I thought that was outstanding. And then one other part, I was wondering if Dr. Lucas would be willing to speak to the SEL piece, because there was some really encouraging data that Dr. Lucas was mentioning at our meeting. Sorry I didn't mention anything ahead of time. I apologize.
No, and this is a nice, from the earlier presentation too. So we talked a lot about, with the SEL data, just some of the impact that it's having within the building and teacher buy-in and their ability to implement and what that data is looking like. And it's all on a positive trend. I think when we were looking at it, you had to be at a 4 or 5 was where they wanted to see you kind of come in and see teacher implementation data and that they're positive with it. And we were pretty much hitting those targets pretty closely to it. But the real true piece of pulling out that data is, what do we need to do now moving forward, given the input from teachers as they're implementing the SEL. And I think I shared in the earlier presentation, I am very excited to share in some future board meeting before the end of the school year our PAYS data, our Pennsylvania Youth Survey data. And it's the voices of our students, what they're experiencing and feeling as far as, drug and alcohol use, mental health, and those kind of things. But I've been working very closely with our partners, with the county, in analyzing that data and then making it actionable. Like, what do we do with this information? And what does our action planning look like? What are the resources we currently have? So we've done a very thorough audit, myself and many of our different Pupil Services team members, and then working alongside our community partners, now what do we need additionally? And I'm talking even outside of the school itself, providing some services. Like, what does connections with different community agencies, services, and supports look like? So that tool is going to help us kind of build those pieces. I always say we can't do this work alone. So I'm very excited and positive about all of that. And we shared a whole lot of that in that meeting. So thank you.
We did, and then I also think you were looking at what does it look like to expand this, because traditionally it had been for the elementary school students, it had been expanded to the middle school, and then I think you may have mentioned about carrying it even further.
Yes, so we have our high school team looking at ways in which they're going to potentially, and I think going to launch social and emotional learning curriculum and instruction next year. They're having those conversations with their teachers, looking at what does that look like from a schedule perspective, and how do we deliver it to all students, not just a target group of students, but at that tier 1. So that work is being discussed, and this summer we plan to kind of dig in and plan it out with a potential launch for the fall. I give credit to Dr. Smith for that and his kind of digging into what that looks like as a next step. Because certainly, yes, it starts at the younger ages, but we can't forget, our students in high school, middle school, they also need to, work through and explicitly be taught and be able to work alongside each other, developing these skills.
Thank you very much for that. Does anybody have any questions? We covered a lot that night. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to move on. Where are we at here now? We have up to new business. Dr. Finnerty, new business.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. Today is our first day of PSSA testing. Nobody's favorite, but these tests are important to our district and to our students and to our staff. And I want to thank everyone for the hard work in supporting our students to have their best opportunity to achieve at a high level. We'll have our testing season has begun. The other thing I wanted to mention and congratulate and thank Dr. Lucas and Mr. Voorhis for their work on the Pre-K Counts grant. We had talked last month about the Pre-K Counts grant. It was a very significant grant, like 29 pages, I think, in all before we submitted it, and the quick turnaround window was a challenge. But Mr. Voorhis and Dr. Lucas worked tirelessly, and I know spent a fair amount of time of their Sunday working with Pre-K Counts. We don't know when we're going to hear, but we do expect to hear before the end of the year, and we're very excited about the possibility of building this program. So thank you for that. And then, as Ms. Custer mentioned, we do have a legislative breakfast this Friday, and we do have a wonderful team of board members heading down to speak with our legislators and see if we can't advocate for our district. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Tina?
You know, I'm kind of lost without. I know, I'm lost without them, both lost and sad, but kind of what Dr. Finnerty was sharing, I'm just wishing all of the students and teachers a lot of luck, because I know May is a heavy month, so we're finishing up April, they're heading into the final stretch, so thinking of each of them and wishing them all the best.
Patty?
Yeah, just quickly, we had our 2023 Hall of Fame ceremony on Saturday, and we had 5 amazing athletic alumni come back. And families came back, coaches came back, teammates came back, and it just brought everybody back home here. They couldn't believe the gym, and they couldn't believe, like, where was the old gym at? Like, it was great, but I do believe there's a link on our homepage where they can see, you can see the speeches.
Correct. Thank you to Gus Tellis of PCTV for filming that event, and that link is on our athletic YouTube site.
So if you get a chance, it's really amazing. So it's just so nice to see everybody come back home. And thank you, Gus. That's all I have.
Jay? Joe? Dr. Nippert? Nothing. Around. Jim?
Orchestra concert tomorrow. 7 o'clock? Is that right, before the orchestra concert? Yes. You know, the person who's going to actually be conducting it. Oh, 7 o'clock, okay.
Bill? Ashley? And nothing from me except the Hall of Fame was out of this world. Definitely congrats to, besides the individuals that won, congratulations and thank you to the committee, which Patty is part of, and also to Steve and to Gary, who run that whole show. So thank you very much to them as well. All right, I need a motion to adjourn. Oh, we don't want to miss that. Wait a minute. Do we have any public comment here? Come on down. Come on down. We don't need a slip. State your name, obviously, township, and you have 2 minutes.
Well, I didn't write anything down, so this is going to be off the fly. Jeanette Clifton, Lower Pottsgrove. My question is I actually agree with Al Leach about 2.5. I mean, everybody's hurting because of this, and I think that's kind of high. I mean, how do you expect to have people come move here if everything keeps skyrocketing? Is just my thoughts. I was also concerned about how so many teachers are resigning and leaving, And then we just heard about elementary school not having enough teachers. Something's going on. I can't put my finger on it. Is this normal to have so many people leave?
I don't normally comment, but again, I'm going to just clarify. When they were
Okay.
talking about the teachers,
Yeah.
they weren't talking about teachers leaving. They were talking about because we have so many students that want to get involved in the new middle school world language, they were asking for more teachers. It didn't have anything to do with the elementary school teachers leaving. That you're talking about earlier when
No. The whole list of resignations for the past year. It's just so many keep leaving. It's like, I thought this was supposed to be a fantastic, district, and why wouldn't they stay? I mean, there's got to be some conflict that's not being addressed. Do you know what I mean?
It's a nationwide problem. There's a massive teacher shortage right now. There's only 5,000 students graduating in the state of Pennsylvania with
Okay.
with education, with teaching certifications. It's a nationwide problem. It's not just a Pottsgrove problem.
But I do understand what you're saying we've had a lot of individuals leaving in the past year, and definitely something we're looking into.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anything? Oh, come on up. And for the record, I have to ask you to raise your name.
I understand. My name is William Einhorn, and I'm a district teacher. As Jim said, my shameless plug is, yes, our orchestra concert is tomorrow night, so come on out to the middle school, 7 o'clock. I will say, we're going to feature one piece of music where one of our social studies teachers is actually going to read the Gettysburg Address tomorrow, since this is actually the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg and the address itself. So that's Mr. Algio. The kids are looking forward to that. I wasn't going to stop over here, but I was listening in on the budget presentations, and I know that I was not here for the beginning, but I was glad to hear that there's going to be a breakfast of some type with our legislator people, because one of the things that I found rather insulting, and not from any of you, but from the state, was earlier this year, in the school year, we heard about all the increases in budget funding that we got, that the state gave us, which, as well any district should be. Norristown received 29%. This is coming from the Mercury itself. Pottstown received 26% in increase. Abington, 21%. Upper Merion, 21%. Springford, 15%. Burke Valley, 10%. We received 7%. That's a slap in the face. With what's that? I understand that. But that is still a slap in the face to us, because we deserve better. The district deserves better. Okay? So my charge and request was going to be, we have to do better than that, because districts that are respectfully, and I'm not talking about Norristown and Pottstown, they absolutely deserve that money, but so do we. We should be getting any less than 10%, in my opinion. That we should be at that 20%. So if you are, whatever we have to do, besides just advocating to say, if we're having a legislative, event, what can we do as a district to do better for us and for the kids? Not just for us as teachers, but for our students. Because I was, and I even mentioned this to some of you in the beginning of the year, that I thought, wow, that number is very off. That was the third lowest in Montgomery County. Third lowest out of 21 districts. The only ones that beat us that were even lower were Upper Perk and Souderton, excuse me. So I just would like to know that the district, as a teacher and as a parent, any district is doing everything we can to advocate. So if we have this opportunity, if I can offer even my help or whatever, yeah, let's do it, because I know that the formula is off, and I that's with any state, it's with a lot of states, but we should be doing better. We should be doing better with state aid, especially given the economic conditions that we're in right now and what has happened. So that's all. I just wanted to bring that to the attention that I really believe we can do better than this. Okay, and I'm not meaning that as an insult to any of you or our administration. I'm meaning that, like, the state should be treating us better. I mean, Upper Marion getting 21% more. With all due respect to the other districts, I think we can do better. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else here? All right, anybody online? All right. I need a motion to adjourn then. I need a second. Meeting adjourned. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.